Hi everybody and welcome back to the Celtic Way YouTube page. My name is Ryan McGinley and today I'm delighted to be joined by Swiss football expert Craig King. Craig, how are you doing this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm all good. Thanks again for having me on.
No bother at all. We're here to talk about Celtic's match day 7 match against Young Boys. It's a massive game for Celtic, potentially could go through. For Young Boys, maybe not so much given their form this season, but always a chance to get points on the board, especially in the Champions League and the financial rewards that can bring you as well. Before we get started, guys, I just want to bring you our latest offer that we're doing at the moment. If I can just bring it up. We are currently doing £1 for 6 months on the Celtic Way at www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. With that, you'll get transfer latest, breaking manager and player interviews, match tactics and analysis with stats bomb data, scouting reports, player analysis, exclusive Celtic interviews, and access to our bespoke ad-free app. All you need to do is go to celticway.co.uk/subscribe, £1 for 6 months. And yeah, guys, get involved. So, Craig, first of all, the first thing I want to ask you is how did you get involved with Swiss football? Because they won't hear a Swiss accent when they hear you speak. You're obviously Scottish, but how did you get into Swiss football?
Yeah, that's probably been my most asked question over the last decade or so since I got into it. But just to kind of try and shorten the story, it started in 2011, totally randomly. Decided to watch a FC Basel game in the Champions League. It was just by chance, really, because there was so many games on that night. I decided I wanted to be different and not watch one of the big games and put on a different game. So Basel was that choice. I remembered their kits and stuff from years before, and I thought I'll just put that game on. They were playing a Romanian team I don't think even exists anymore. And I decided from then I'll try and keep track of their games and stuff. And their next game that was on TV in the UK was against Manchester United away from home. They put in a great performance and they only failed to win in the last minute. Manchester United equalised and it was a great performance and all that. So after that, I just kept keeping track of their scores and that and tried to watch some of their games domestically. And then after a while, I kind of realised that there wasn't really anywhere on Twitter for, Swiss football in English like there is for similar sized leagues and even bigger leagues. And I started the Twitter account just to kind of see where it would go, more of a hobby sort of thing. In my own mind, I didn't really expect anything from it. And then, yeah, it's kind of snowballed from there over the years that I've been fortunate enough to be able to have opportunities, not just with the Swiss clubs, but with the Swiss national team to talk about them and go over there and experience some of the games and things like that. And then obviously I was able to work with FC Basel for a time as well, which was mad to me considering that's how it all started. And yeah, I didn't ever think it would get to that point, but I managed to make some friends over there and, as I say, visit a couple of times. So it's as much as it was a hobby, it's been able to go into something much more than I ever expected.
That's very interesting, yeah, and there has been links with Basel and Celtic in recent years in terms of players that have played for both teams. You look at Mohamed El Younousi and Albion Ayeti, the two of them played at the same time. There was that partnership that maybe didn't go to plan in the 2020-21 season. There was a lot of excitement when those two were partnered together, one on the left wing and one up front, but that didn't necessarily work out. Obviously, Basel have had Mohamed Salah as well, among other players that have came through their system. Some brilliant players have came through there. But we're here to talk about Young Boys. Young Boys are Celtic's opponents in match day 7 of the Champions League. Just looking at their domestic form, it's a bit of a surprise, and it's been a bit of a surprise the whole season because I think a lot of Celtic supporters and people who are covering Celtic have been watching Young Boys and watching their developments over the course of the season. They're currently 9th in the Swiss Super League, which is a bit of a surprise, I would say. So my question to you, Craig, is what has happened this season that's caused them to be in this position?
Yeah, so to give some backstory, obviously Young Boys weren't always the dominant team. It used to be Basel, and then people used to cry out for something different, a change from Basel winning all the time, and then Young Boys just took over and started winning all the time. So it wasn't really the change people wanted, but they won 6 out of the last 7 titles, I think it was. And again, last season they won the title, but they won it by 12 points, which suggests it was another kind of easy run. But they were in a title race until, say, the last couple of months. Once the split happened, they'd sacked the manager and they brought in the under-21 coach again to be in interim charge. And he kind of led them to the title. Servette and Lugano fell away at that point. But it wasn't really a comfortable title win. There was still inconsistency there. And it looked good on paper that they were 12 points clear, but, it didn't tell the full story. And I think maybe the club didn't really heed the warnings of that because they didn't really strengthen like they should have in the transfer window. And then they brought in a manager, Patrick Raman, who was in charge of Winterthur, who typically they've played in the second division since 1986. It was until promotion a couple of years ago. And then after the first season where they survived, they managed a mid-table finish. So that got him the young boys job. That was a bit of a risk because although he'd been Basel manager before for a short time, that was in a period when Basel were kind of in transition. And, he hasn't really had a job like young boys before. So that was a risk in itself. As I say, they didn't really strengthen much. But I also don't think anyone expected it to go as badly as it did because the squad as it was still good enough, to be higher up in the table, challenging for the title. But the start of the season was just really horrific. I think they won only 4 of the first 10 games. 2 of them were against lower league opposition in the cup, amateur sides. And then 2 of them were home and away against Galatasaray, which made no sense whatsoever. Every other game they were drawing at the bottom of the table and things. And it just didn't start well at all. Form-wise, it's improving now. They sacked Patrick Raman in October. Again, the interim under-21 manager was brought in. And I think that's like the third time over the last 5 years, which again is mad because they've been so successful to have him coming in to kind of steady the ship so often. But it took this time over the winter break to, get the new manager, identify the right person. And they've went with Georgio Cantini now, who just had his first game at the weekend there. He was the assistant manager for Murat Yakin, the Swiss national team. And he's a part of the reason in many people's eyes that Switzerland did so well in the summer because there was a lot of question marks about them because their qualifying campaign wasn't good. And they went into that and obviously reached the quarter-final, ran England close, and he got all the credit for that. So they've brought him in now. I think the form will improve there and they see him as the man to kind of keep them going. They want to have a manager in place long-term now instead of changing. So, I think things will improve for them going forward. They're still only 8 points off the top of the table, which is crazy considering they're down in 9th. Kind of shows the inconsistency of everybody else as well. So it's still not an absolute disaster of a season yet. Obviously, Champions League hasn't went well at all for them, but that was never really the priority after they got past Galatasaray, although I'm sure they'd have liked to have done better than they have.
Yeah, before we go and talk about Georgio Cantini in a bit more detail, they're currently 36, which is bottom in the Champions League. It has been a difficult European campaign. What would you put that down to? Would you put it down to the fact that the managerial appointment just didn't work out, the fact they had to change manager midway through the season, bring in the under-21 coach, as you said? What do you think has been the main reason why the campaign just hasn't worked out for young boys?
I think a combination of all those things. The manager just wasn't up to scratch. I think the amount of games they were playing, obviously midweek to weekend, while being in such a difficult position domestically with that pressure, I don't think that helped them out much as well. The squad just wasn't strong enough overall. I think the fixture list hasn't been particularly kind to them either. They've played some big teams in there. I think the only game where you would kind of look at and think they could have maybe taken something was Shakhtar away. So there's not really been, a couple of teams there where you could think they should be doing a lot better. I think the disappointment is that this whole campaign was kind of seen as a bonus for them because not many would have expected them to get past Galatasaray, and they did that. So to reach this stage, to become the first Swiss team to get into the league phase was a massive achievement. Obviously, they'd have liked to have done better, and absolutely they'll be seeing themselves as a team that shouldn't be bottom there. I mean, their bottom on goal difference, they'll see themselves as a team that, with respect to Slovan Bratislava, they're better than them. And they'll still have ambitions, I think, to go and not finish bottom of the table because they don't want to be that team that finishes bottom of the league phase first time ever. A combination of all those things, and I think generally the opponents have been very difficult indeed. But the manner of performances is probably the most disappointing thing because while they were expected to lose to teams like Atalanta at home and things like that, the manner of the defeat with 6 goals and stuff, it's just not really been good enough.
Yeah, so it's Georgio Cantini that's in charge now, Patrick Raman's replacement midway through the season. Has there been any noticeable changes thus far? I know you said he's only played 1 game, but have you seen any noticeable changes from the previous manager or maybe even the interim manager in his spell at the time to what Georgio Cantini is doing just now?
Not really, to be honest. It's still, early days, and that game against Winterthur at the weekend was probably a hard one to kind of gauge because, I mean, in that game, under any manager, young boys are always going to be on the front foot and dominating the ball and all that sort of thing. He has made one change goalkeeper-wise, which is he's replaced David Van Bommels as a club legend, 200 plus appearances with the club. He's going to be number 2 now, which is a big call because there was uncertainty over that position generally that both Patrick Raman and the interim manager didn't really solve. It was kind of in limbo, and he's come in and made that decision straight away, which will cause a wee bit of controversy because obviously a club legend, you'll split opinion on terms of if it's his time. He's only 30 years old, I think it is, to move to the side and let the younger keeper come in. But that's kind of shows the way it'll be going forward. Georgio Cantini is a guy who's going to make those decisions. He's a good people person, and he's going to do what's best for what he thinks is best for the club. He spoke in the press conference, although he actually called the keeper that he's promoted is called Marvin Keller. He actually called him Marvin Hitz, who is a Basel keeper, so that is not a good start on the press conference. But he's made that decision, and he said it was purely based on his opinion and the way that his whole team's looked into it and all that and all the statistics and things, and that's the decision they've came to. And that kind of bodes well for me in the future because he's going to make the decisions that are best for the club. The one thing I will say is he seems to also prefer one up front, which has been pretty much constant throughout his teams, and I think that'll be the same at Young Boys.
Yeah, so you talk about one up front. What formation do Young Boys play, and is pressing a key part of Young Boys' game? Because it's been spoke about quite a bit prior to this game that they're going to continue to press regardless.
Again, I think it'll change in Europe. I mean, Georgio Cantini is a kind of smart manager. He's not going to go to Celtic Park, in my opinion, and go for it, because that would be foolish, especially with Young Boys' kind of frailties defensively. I think he'll be kind of more conservative, but not anything like parking the bus and anything like that. I think they'll try and take their opportunities on the counter. They've got a lot of pace at the top end of the pitch where they'll see themselves as being able to hurt Celtic, and I think that'll be the game plan going into that game. Obviously, domestically, it's a bit different. They are expected against most teams, to dominate the ball, especially in the lower half of the table, both home and away. So it's a different challenge for them, but then I guess it's not dissimilar to Celtic at times when they go into Europe and they're playing teams where they're not going to dominate the ball as well. But yeah, again, this game isn't really a priority. I think they've got a game against Red Star next week at home, where they might see that as the one where they can kind of move themselves off the foot of the table. But they'll definitely, try and get something from this game and try and hurt Celtic. But it's not, in terms of result, I don't think if they get beat, as long as it's not obviously a humiliating defeat or anything like that, I don't think it's going to have too much ramifications going forward at all.
Mm-hmm. So is it a 4-2-3-1 that they play, or a 4-5-1? I know that they play one up top.
Yeah, so it's 4-2-3-1 at the weekend. And again, Giorgio Cantini he's changed a few times. Like I say, he's not managed in the Super League for a few years now. I think it's 4 years. I think it was Lausanne preferred 3 at the back, Grasshoppers 4 at the back, maybe the other way around. But yeah, like I said, the one kind of constantly seems to be favouring more one striker up front. And I guess we'll see going forward over the next few weeks what his preferred kind of formation is, because it is still early days in that regard.
Yeah. So what would you say that the strengths are in the Young Boys team? Where would you say that area that could potentially hurt Celtic the most would be found?
Definitely up top, they've got a lot of pace, like I mentioned. They've got Joe Montero, who just made his debut for the Swiss national team tail end of last year. He's made 4 caps. He scored away against Spain. He scored 2 goals against Galatasaray in qualifying. Like many of the Young Boys players, he's not really hit the heights of last season, but he's a goal threat. He's fast, and again, that pace can hurt Celtic. You've also got Meshek Elia, who's more of a kind of impact player off the bench. He scored against Leipzig and Man City in the Champions League last year, and again, goals and assists and pace with him. He's had kind of a lot of personal issues at the tail end of last year, and he's not played as much as perhaps would have been liked, but he's a player that can definitely cause Celtic a lot of problems. He's been there and done it with Young Boys for so long, so experienced at this level as well. He's played in previous campaigns with Young Boys, and he's one to watch as well. Also, like Filip Ugrinich, who's midfielder, also on the Swiss national team, more on the fringes of the national team. He's been one of the bright sparks in the Young Boys team, considering their troubles this season. And then up top, you'll either have Silver Gunvula or Cedric Eaton, who we mentioned previously. Again, they're not scoring maybe as much as last season, but they do have goals in them. And I do think mainly the pace will be what can hurt Celtic on Wednesday night. And again, it's going to be on the counter and things like that where they can maybe hurt Celtic. But that's probably the one strength I'll say. Weakness is much bigger issue for me. Defensively, it's not been settled all season. Even now, they've got a captain, Maurice Benito, who has just came back from a bad injury. He's obviously experienced both for the national team as well and in Switzerland. And he's just came back. But so he's going to be the one constant now for me. But around him, it's all been changing. I mentioned the goalkeeper as well. That's changed. I don't know if that's going to be just a league thing or if he's going to be the keeper in the Champions League as well. But yeah, the defence is so unsettled. There's been some new faces brought in there as well. Also got Mo Kamara, who for some reason every manager has stuck with over the last few years in Bern. I don't know why, because he's just a mistake waiting to happen. He's actually cost young boys so often, and it always frustrates me to no end because he seems to always be the choice to start these kind of games. People might actually know him from last season. They played against Man City and they were getting beat. And at half time, he wanted to swap shirts with Haaland, which didn't really go down well. Again, it doesn't really help when he's also making these mistakes at the same time. So he was actually suspended for the last 2 games in the league. So I don't actually know if he'll be back in the team, but it's a good thing if he is because, again, like I say, he's just such a nightmare defensively at times that you never know what you're going to get with him. But honestly, whatever defensive lineup starts for young boys, I don't really see Celtic not troubling them because they're so unsettled. And we've seen it in this campaign. They've obviously conceded a lot of goals to a lot of good teams. But there's been times where they've kind of folded, like as soon as they've conceded that goal. Atalanta's a great example at home. They conceded and then they just kept conceding after that. It was like there was no cohesion, nothing. They just were so fragile. And that mentality is just totally gone. I think that will improve under the new manager, but I still think it's early days. And with the attack that Celtic's got, they'll be able to hurt young boys, definitely.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. What players will Cantini be looking out for as potential trouble for young boys for his team? What players do you think he's probably earmarked? Do you think it'll be Nicholas Kuhn, Daizen Maeda, Kyogo?
Yeah, all the above. I think especially the way that Celtic play at times, with the balls across the box for Kyogo and players like that, I think that's going to be a nightmare for young boys defensively. And yeah, there's so many options for Celtic to hurt this already fragile defence that I can't see any other way than, Celtic just taking advantage of that on the night. And I just don't see with the pressure that Celtic can put teams under, especially at home. There just seems to be no way in my mind that young boys can, keep them out. Like I say, I do think there is that pace at the top end where Celtic aren't switched on, young boys can hurt them, but I just don't see young boys being able to score enough goals to prevent Celtic winning this game, especially with that attack that Celtic have and those players that you mentioned.
Yep, so you talk about the counter-attack, and the Celtic obviously get caught out recently against Dundee a couple of times with some counter-attacking play from Dundee. Young boys are obviously a better team than Dundee, even though they're maybe not showing it as much this season. Is that the main area that you think that maybe young boys can get at Celtic on that transition in the counter-attack?
Yeah, definitely. I think if they're going to get a goal, then that will be where it comes from. And just on the Dundee point, at this point, I wouldn't put my confidence in young boys against Dundee. But I think that will generally be their avenue for attack, for the way that they'll maybe get a goal or two. Like I say, there's a lot of pace in that team. And I think someone like Meshach Elia can trouble Greg Taylor with his pace. Even on the other side, Joe Montero, who's Alistair Johnson's obviously a very competent defender, but I think that pace is what can hurt Celtic. But like I say, I don't think young boys are going to have enough kind of opportunities to prevent Celtic winning this game. And, Celtic would have looked at this game beforehand, before any of young boys' troubles came to light, when the draw was first made back in August or whenever it was, that this would have been a game that they had to win, if they want to progress. And they'll still see that even more now because of the way young boys have played. As much as young boys have shown they can, spring a surprise or two against Galatasaray in the past in Europe, their away record's just not great, and the situation they're in just now, it's all set up for them to be easy pickings.
Mm-hmm. What sort of mentality do you think that young boys will bring to this game? Because, they're playing for maybe financial gains in terms of putting points on the board and their overall position at the end of the league. Obviously, even if they were to win their next 2 games, 6 points wouldn't be enough to get to the playoffs. Celtic are currently on 9, and it looks as if they'll need about 12 to get through to the playoffs, judging by the way that results go. Obviously, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, so it's before match day 7, so we don't even know what way the league is going to go, how many points Celtic will need. Maybe Celtic will only need 9 or 10, but that's looking unlikely at this point. What sort of mentality do you think that young boys will be bringing to this, knowing that their European competition is basically over and it's a bit of a free hit? Do you think they'll have a bit of freedom coming into the game, or will they see it as another game that maybe they're under a bit of pressure?
I think there's less pressure now because obviously there's the change in manager, and I think he'll be given time and the team will be given time. Under Patrick Raman, it was almost like they'd have a bad league game and then all of a sudden they're coming up against an Atalanta or Stuttgart, and it's just another, heavyweight where they're going to get a bad result. And even though they were expected to lose that game, I think it then added even more pressure because they were getting beaten heavily. But I think this one is kind of like a free hit because away at Celtic's a hard game at the best of times. I think from what I've seen when the draw was made, there's a lot of excitement, especially from the fans, to go and play at Celtic and experience the atmosphere and all that comes with it. But like I say, yeah, a free hit, they'll have a chance to maybe put some points on the board, but it's not a disaster. As long as they don't go there and get absolutely destroyed, then I don't think there's going to be anything from that game that will be a real disappointment. They'll just go and enjoy and try and take something from it. Like I say, the game against Red Star next week probably comes with more pressure because that's at home and it's a game, one of the few games, like I say, where they probably see it as a chance to put some points on the board. And they took 4 points from Red Star in the Champions League last season or the season before, and they'll be looking to take some points off them again and get themselves off the foot of that table, because as much as the league form and domestic form is going to be the priority now, I think come next week there'll be that desire just to get off the bottom of the table, forgetting all the kind of financial aspects and that. You just don't want to finish bottom. And again, like I say, with respect to Slovan Bratislava, I think young boys are a better team generally, and to finish what would most likely be bottom 1 goal difference would be a real disappointment.
Yeah, I think both young boys and RB Leipzig will be saying that at the same time, that they're too good a team to be on 0 points at this moment in time. But it's the luck of the draw. I know that both young boys and RB Leipzig have had quite tough draws as well, maybe a couple of questionable results as well, but tough draws for the most part. Last couple of questions. How many fans are young boys bringing over to Glasgow? Because the last time I checked, I heard there was quite a few fans making the journey from Switzerland to Glasgow.
Yeah, I don't know exact numbers, but they always travel well. It was the same. They played Rangers a few years ago and brought quite a lot of fans over there as well. And they always, I think one thing that's always kind of underestimated about Swiss football is how good the fans are. Across the clubs, even the smaller clubs, I think people are always surprised that, they're always so colourful and noisy and, energetic and all that stuff. And I think it'll be the same. Obviously there's nothing to play for here, but they'll enjoy the experience of going to Celtic and experiencing that atmosphere. And I think, I have no doubt actually, that they'll add to the atmosphere themselves on the night, regardless of the form and all that. They always bring the noise, and I think that'll be the case on Wednesday.
Brilliant, that's what we love to hear. Just another question on the players that maybe people are familiar with from Scottish football that are currently on the books at young boys. Probably only see one of them. In fact, we'll definitely only see one of them if he gets on the park, if he starts, or if he comes on as a sub. You've got Sadie Yanko, who used to be at Celtic, and Cedric Eaton, who used to be at Rangers. They're both familiar to Scottish football. Yanko's currently injured, I believe. Will we see the former Rangers striker then, potentially?
Well, he played at the weekend, and he was subbed off after, I don't know how many minutes, but he was subbed off second half for Granvilla. It's kind of toss up on who starts. But I think he's one of those players. I remember when Celtic played Slovan Bratislava, Vladimir Weiss said that he was surprised that obviously remembered and all that sort of thing. And I think it'll be the same on Wednesday, maybe not to the same degree, but because Cedric Eaton didn't really have an impact at Rangers. But I think he'll be surprised by maybe the reception he gets as an ex-Rangers player. But yeah, he's a player that could start. And again, he's one of those players that I think people in Scotland look at and, dismiss because they had a bad time here. But he's proven himself in Switzerland before. And last season was a good season for him as well. He's kind of hit and miss. He's not the best finisher in the world, but he can still, score a good few goals. So he's definitely one to watch.
Yeah, my final question to you, Craig, is what do you think the score is going to be between Celtic and Young Boys on match day 7 of the Champions League?
I'm going to go 3-1 Celtic, like I mentioned before. I think Young Boys can hurt Celtic, but I just don't see any way that Young Boys can repel Celtic in this game. Celtic will be so hungry for those points that pretty much ensures qualification, and with the attacking players that they've got that we've mentioned, I don't see how that Young Boys defence keeps them out. I think if anything, Young Boys can only hope to stay in the game and maybe get the crowd more frustrated and all that, because I do think that there's a lot of people that will underestimate Young Boys. I think there's a right to be confident, very confident given Young Boys' form, and like I say, this was a game that would have been earmarked as 3 points, but I do think that there's a lot of people being dismissive of Young Boys. They've done enough in Europe over the last few years, and even that Galatasaray result at the start of August, or end of August, sorry, they've shown that they can, cause a surprise now and again. So I'm not saying that don't be confident, but I do think there has been a lot of people being dismissive, which is a bit disrespectful to Young Boys in my opinion, but I do think Celtic will win pretty comfortably in the end up.
At the end of the day, this is Celtic in Europe as well. Yeah, and there is that confidence that's kind of seeped in. But I think there is a bit of nerves as well, knowing what it means for Celtic and what a win could potentially mean in the Champions League and where that would take them in terms of the playoffs into the next round. Thank you so much, Craig, for jumping on today. We really do appreciate your expert insight into Young Boys. Just quickly, where can people find you if they haven't already found you online in terms of your work and what you do with regards to Swiss football?
Yeah, so if you want to follow any of my stuff, which is basically my Twitter account or X account, which I absolutely hate calling it that, but it covers all things Swiss football, men's national team, women's national team, and all that sort of stuff. So if you want to keep up to date with Swiss football, then you can follow me at Football Swiss Ian.
Yeah, highly recommend it, guys. Please do so. Just quickly before we finish off, just another quick shout out for our subscription offer that we're currently doing at the moment. celticway.co.uk/subscribe, just £1 for 6 months. On there, you get transfer latest, breaking manager player interviews, match tactics and analysis with stats bomb data or data providers, scouting reports and player analysis, exclusive Celtic interviews, and this bespoke ad-free app. Thank you very much, Craig, for joining me. Really do appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the game tomorrow. We will be live both pre and post match with all things Celtic Young Boys. Until then, guys, thank you so much for joining us and enjoy the game tomorrow when it comes or whenever you're watching this video. Cheers, guys, and have a very good day.